our family, really. We kind of just want to have this sort of bubble in the woods be the way we wish the rest of the world could be, I think.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the beautiful Wolf Garden showroom here in Chicago. We're here to talk about an amazing suite of new products that address both human well-being and ecological well-being. Just some fantastic solutions, and here to talk to me about it is Chief Creative Officer at Wolf Garden, Marybeth Shaw. Marybeth, thank you so much for joining me here today.
It's my pleasure, Avi.
You guys have just brought out this amazing suite of new solutions for architects and designers to help them make a positive impact on both people and on planet. And you know, in categories where it has been historically very challenging to do that.
Extremely, yes. Wall covering especially.
Wall covering especially.
We've been very, very busy before the pandemic and throughout the pandemic, and we've really made it a priority at Wolf Garden to focus on more sustainable product development.
So we're going to be talking about 3 categories of products that you have solutions for. We have wall covering, we have wall protection, and we have upholstery. So kick us off, Marybeth. Tell us about the wall covering.
All right. Well, we're extremely proud of Claire. This is a new wall covering collection that is type 2. It's PVC free and it's bleach cleanable.
What a perfect solution for the time we're in. You know, here's a product that sits at the intersection of the climate crisis and our health crisis, because it is PVC free and bleach cleanable. You know,
yes.
So to have that performance with this chemistry, with the olefin chemistry, is amazing. It is a real breakthrough, an amazing step in the right direction.
We're very pleased to be the first ones out with it, and we're definitely committed to expansion of Claire.
That's amazing, amazing. I hope to see Claire in lots of projects going forward. Tell us about the wall protection solution.
Yes, well, you may be familiar with our very popular Rampart wall protection. Rampart has been a fast-growing category for us because it meets all of the rigid requirements of impact resistance, and it's also beautifully printed and embossed. Now, what we're really excited about today is that we're introducing Rampart Resolve. Rampart Resolve is also PVC free. It's also resistant to all kinds of quaternary disinfectants. They can be used on it. Bleach cleanable, you name it, it is a great product, and it's got a special coating that makes it even more stain resistant. So this is a super high performing PVC-free product in wall protection.
That's incredible to have finally a PVC-free solution in this space. I mean, think about hospitals, think about hotels, think about all the places where hundreds of people use the space, and you sometimes can't find a sustainable solution because it has to stand up to this kind of rigor, and that's incredible. Rampart Resolve, that's a winner. That's amazing.
Definitely. So currently we have 4 patterns in Rampart Resolve, and again, a commitment on Wolf Garden's part to continue to introduce PVC-free wall protection.
Amazing. So I know that with Rampart Resolve, you also now have a way to retrofit spaces with it, which is also a sustainable solution. Do you want to talk a little about that? I have a little sample here.
Thank you. Yeah, we are all about solutions. And this product, which is called Stronghold Wall Liner, is really wonderful. When there's a situation with a rough wall, it could be CMUs, it could be tile, you can put this wonderful jute and plaster of Paris product down over the rough wall surface, And then you can put Rampart Resolve on top, and you have a completely PVC-free, sustainable solution. No furring out of the wall is required. All of the extra labor and materials are eliminated, and it's more cost effective. So this is really an outstanding solution for our industry in renovation.
That's amazing. What an amazing way to just update spaces, because normally if you were doing that, you would have to fur out the wall, and then what happens to all that wall material you're taking out?
The dump.
The dump, and so now here's a way for us to update spaces with the performance that's possible now with a PVC-free solution.
Exactly.
And using sustainable materials again with plaster and jute. That's amazing.
Right. You get it.
Okay, Myret, you got us covered on walls. Shall we go talk about upholstery?
It's one of my favorites.
Okay, let's go. So Myret, tell us about the first upholstery collection. There's a new one out, Sirona, right?
Yes, it's Sirona. It's a really remarkable high-performance story. We spent a year and a half developing this product with our partners Coats Group, an international yarn company, and Geosheared Fabrics, a Canadian mill. Sirona is our industry's first inherently antimicrobial fabric. What that means is it is not a topical antimicrobial that has all kinds of toxic chemicals in it. With Sirona, the antimicrobial copper and silver salts are embedded in the yarn. So they cannot wash out, they can't go into the water system, they can't affect human health. They're inert anyway, so they wouldn't do any damage. But it's inherently antimicrobial, so it's completely safe. It's also 88% recycled post-consumer material. And this is really, really important that we keep recycling and we work on the life cycle of the product. We have 13 colorways. I think it's a beautiful fabric as well with a great hand, and it can go into any vertical market where health and wellness is a priority.
I think it's a great example of how you can, by making the right product choice, you can actually hit your goals on both addressing the climate crisis and in terms of safeguarding people's health and well-being, right? So it's not always a trade-off. You have to find the solutions that can do both. Before we end today, I want us to talk about one more upholstery product, and this is one of my favorites from Wolf Garden. It's your cork upholstery, and I think we have one right here. Tell us about cork.
Well, cork is a rapidly renewable resource. It's an amazing story. The cork bark is cut from trees, and it can be cut every 9 to 14 years, and the bark grows back. It's beautiful material. Every single piece of cork is unique. It is one of our best-selling natural products. We offer it not only as an upholstery textile, as illustrated here, but also as a wall covering. It has acoustical properties, it has insulating properties, temperature-wise, so it really hits all the right notes. And absolutely full life cycle, biodegradable, gorgeous product.
It's amazing. I think what's incredible is that there's a solution almost for every level of performance, both in terms of how a space performs, but also how it performs for human health and also for ecosystem health, right? So you have an extremely durable, PVC-free Type 2 vinyl wall covering, as well as a wall protection solution, optimized for adaptive reuse, which is something we've been advocating for at Metropolis. We need more of that. And then upholstery solutions that support health and well-being and also are made of rapidly renewable resources.
I'll say one more thing. They're super durable. They exceed 100,000 double rubs on the Weizenbeek. These are commercial grade products, and they're great for all of our vertical markets.
So if anybody tells you that it's not possible to achieve commercial grade performance with sustainable product, you've proved them wrong. Thank you so much, Maribeth. This is amazing. Thank you for everything
Avi.
you do. Thank you for what you do for our industry and for the planet. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tracy Morris. I'm coming to you today from my studio in McLean, Virginia. Architects, builders, and homeowners alike all ask the same question. How do I pick the right white? What is the right white for my space? White paint can be super confusing as a result of there being so many options. I'm going to help you figure out exactly how to pick the right white. I know it is super confusing. These days, everybody talks about colors in tonal whites and clean whites and warm whites. Let me help you understand that a little bit better. So warm whites, all that means is that you have a little bit of red in the base. That red can come out in versions of beige, and it can come out in pink. With regard to cold whites, that has a little bit more blue or gray in the base. I'm going to first start with ceilings. A beautiful white allows so much light to enter the room and make your entire room glow. But what white do I use? That's the question I hear all the time. Under 30 feet, I select decorator's white because it has a little bit more warmth to pull the ceiling down. If you have a really high ceiling, that particular color, I suggest atrium white. It has a bit of pink in it that's going to give an extra glow and an extra warmth in order to pull down your ceiling so it doesn't feel so high. Other whites with regard to trim. In order to create that truly custom look, try adding a little bit of tone to your white for your trim. That color, I would suggest, is Dove White or OC17. It has a lot of beige in the back tone, which allows you to get a beautiful custom finish that really looks white but doesn't feel builder grade. When you are working on your walls, if you are trying to show off amazing pieces on your walls, it really is best to paint your trim and your walls all the same color. Your space feels enormous, and your artwork and your beautiful furnishings stand out. The color I suggest would be Ballet White or OC9. On your doors and your crown and your base, use a semi-gloss paint in order to allow those textures to come out. On your walls, use a surface that is scrubbable or wipeable, like a mat or any of the amazing Benjamin Moore products that allow you to scrub your walls. And you'll create the perfect space.
Hello, I'm Helene Oberman, Managing Director of Interior Design Magazine, and I'd like to welcome you to ProductLive. This is our series that delves into the products and trends, grabbing the industry, and in real time, looking at the minds behind the design. For more than 65 years, Andreu World has been fostering a symbiotic relationship with wood. They have learned everything about this noble material, cultivating its growth in their sustainable forest, nurturing it throughout their custody, and ultimately manufacturing it with the utmost expertise and craftsmanship into their product designs. They respect and make use of every last single fiber of wood harvested, and it's with the same care that they have made a dedicated commitment to protecting the environment. With me today to discuss the brand's pledge to live in balance with the environment through their use of wood is Jesus Linares, CEO of Andreu World. Bienvenidos, Jesus.
Thank you very much, Helena. Thank you very much, Interior Design.
So we're going to be discussing really a topic that I know is very near and dear to the brand, and that is wood, a material that is in the very DNA of Andreu World. So your latest publication of stories is really focused on this material. So why did you feel it important, especially right now at this moment of time, to engage the design community about the importance of wood?
Wood for us is everything. You know, the origin of the company 65 years ago is because of that. For us, it was the first technology that the company started working with. Is a way to express a lot of things. From one side, express the culture of our region. No? We are from Valencia, is in the east of Spain, is in the Mediterranean area. The wood has been part of our culture since 1,000 years, and the craftsmanship and everything related with working with the wood, it's something that it's an heritage of our know-how, of our history, of our culture. The wood that we use is hardwood. That means it means wood that takes like 200 years to grow the tree, and then is important for us to have the best work and the best use of this material, because it's kind of luxury for us.
So your publication stories, which I know that you come out with, is broken up into 12 different chapters. And I thought today it would be really good to highlight sort of 4 of them during our discussion about wood. And it just so happens the first one is life. So you've really found a correlation between life, wood, and our carbon footprint. So can you tell us more about this relationship and its impact on your manufacturing process?
Clearly, the importance of the carbon footprint now is there is no discussion. No, everybody is talking now about the reduction of the consumption of energy, the importance of the circularity in the use of the material, and when you generate a new design, and then life and wood are totally related. No? From one side, we are using wood, and the forest by itself is negative in the carbon footprint, and the wood is neutral for the carbon footprint. Because of that, all of our processes make us a neutral company from the meaning of use of energy or the transformation of the materials. Then life and wood are synonymous. And for us, this is the more important thing. And obviously, what we try to do is to reapply that to the rest of the materials, of the technologies that we are using in our catalog, in our offer.
And really, actually, as you're designing all of your products, I mean, you're really taking into consideration how each of your individual pieces, as you're introducing them into the market, may ultimately impact the environment.
We have a commitment and a total engagement with the concept of circular economy. Our idea is not fulfill the 2030, but advance the 2030 to 2025.
Well, you know, to achieve this goal, so just to be clear to our audience, so by 2025, I mean, as a company, Andreu World wants to achieve, you know, carbon neutral footprint and circular economy for all of the products that you're producing, wood or not. But, you know, certainly you can't do this alone. And, you know, you have enlisted some amazing help from design luminaries, and you always have had, I should say, really great design collaborators, you know, to work alongside your master crafts people. So you've just begun working with Felipe Stark of all people, and I think it's your first time working with him, who has just launched several new designs with Andreu World. So I thought it might be nice. Let's start with one of them, the Forest Club, which I just happened to have seen at NeoCon, which is beautiful in person. But it's interesting because you're actually using a joint that has been in use since the Middle Ages, but really tell us more about the design of the Forest Club.
Yes, really, Forest Club has been one of the first pieces that we developed, and we worked together with Felipe Stark. I should tell you that Felipe Stark has been a more than a positive surprise for us, in the meaning of not only the creativity, but the leadership, obviously trying to do the most sustainable use of all the elements and all the materials that are part of the design. And Forest particularly include, in addition to the material that is FSC 100% wood, is the use of the clavet. The clavet is something that for us it's a good addition. It's a kind of connecting system in order to assemble or disassemble this sofa, in a second life or after at the end of the life of the product, then helping to this future use that you can have reupholstering or could be just finishing, going to the dust of this product. And then the clavetis, the good thing is that he's recovering with this design an element that was used 500 years ago in the mid-century as a system to join and to put together different parts in furniture in construction. These capabilities in this design.
So, I think it's one of those things where obviously you almost need to see it in person to really understand. But, moving on, because, thinking about sort of this idea of, you're talking about this craftsmanship, but, another chapter within stories is the future. So, thinking about the future, one may think that like plastics is the material of the future, but you actually see wood and really the potential surrounding the technology that has been built up to work with it as sort of the future thinking. So in this way, would you say that wood is not just really about the handicraft as you would see maybe in the Forest Club, but also about computers and technology and really careful consumption?
Yes, obviously the future it's a combination of everything, no? It's a combination of the new materials and the new techniques, but at the same time the knowledge, no? I think for us this is the main purpose, no? We try to have the best technicians, the best people, the best engineers working with us. We try to collect the know-how that we have not only into the company but outside of the company. We learn sometimes from artisans. We see that sometimes in some countries, particularly in companies that we know closely in the last 50 years, they are sometimes losing this kind of know-how. And for us, this is, as I mentioned before, kind of luxury, not only the material, the wood, but all the how you treat the material, how you work with the material. Then this is for us a critical, important objective, a relevant strategic objective. And the second thing is try to add the maximum technology. That means we obviously use the CNC machine and all the automatic processes that we can, but combining craftsmanship with ultravision, with latest technology. It always has been a combination of both, which make Andreu World known.
Well, I was going to say, I think a really good example of this sort of dichotomy is Felipe Stark's solo chair. So really, how are you able to combine the artist's hand that you're known for as a brand with more technological processes in the design of this chair?
Solo chair it's a good example. In that case, this is more solid wood. It's not plywood like forest. Ash is the wood that we are using in that case, and it's kind of a sculptural shape. What you see with the legs, but mainly with the arms. But at the same time, it's good for health. It's good for economy. It's good for comfort, and gives character to the piece. In that case, obviously, the combination of first of all of the creativity and from the design, and afterwards the craftsmanship of our artisans working with initial prototypes.
I'd love to talk about one of your longtime collaborators, who's Pier Giorgio Casaniga, and he just launched the Laseo Chair. So how does something like the Laseo really embody that tradition of woodworking that is, the brand is known for?
No, Laseo, it's a beautiful piece because realistically, we did it in one piece, all the arms and all the back rest. Few examples you can have in the world, in the design world, by doing this in only one piece. The good thing of that means we are maintaining the grain of the wood, and this is transmitting the maximum resistance to this piece, and at the same time the beauty of have the simplicity of only one single piece this kind of shape that Periodo generates with Liceo. That is a new design that became classic since the first moment because of the shape and the design. But having this continuity and not joints is something that make it unique.
And I think that, like you were saying, I mean, you know, I know wood is like in your DNA, but it seems to also be obviously in Pier Giorgio's, and it comes across in this very elegant classic chair. I want to sort of touch on, because I know we've talked about the fact that, you know, as a company, you know, you're focused on becoming, you know, carbon neutral, your circular economy of the use of wood, you know, the fact that you were the first to be 100% FSC certified, you know, something that may, you know, our audience and designers may not be as aware of is that the fact that all your pieces are guaranteed, and like what type of actual commitment does this mean for the company?
You know what, for us, we always has been working to have a durable design in the meaning of contemporary enough to resist the pass of the time in any place. On the other hand, the resistance is part of this durability. It's important. Then our company, we offer since the 70s the possibility to reuse, to reutilize, to repaint or reupholster our product. We offer this service since the 70s because we believe in a product that can be inherited. That means a product that can pass the time successfully and stay a long period of time in the places. And because of that, we try to deliver the best and the maximum quality. In that case, our commitment is minimum 10 years warranty in all the products anywhere in the world. We are realistically offering a service of any kind of repair. This is something that we offer since the beginning, because for us this is synonymous of authentic sustainability.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely, and there should be a timelessness anyways to the design, so that whether it was in the 70s when you first sort of launched this guaranteed program or to now, it is important. And I think your new introductions really capture this sort of elegant timelessness. And another piece that I wanted to touch on was the Rizzo Chair. And, you know, how was the collaboration between Andreu World and Rodolfo Dordoni like in the design of the Rizzo Chair?
Rodolfo Dordoni is a well-known architect, mainly in Europe probably. He offers solutions with upholstered arms or wooden arms. The back you can combine with the same fabric than the front, or a different fabric in the back with two basic colors. Then this give us the chance, or the designer the chance to generate a very fresh proposal using wood. Wood sometimes depends on the combination of colors and materials and designs. It's a classic by itself material, but in that case, Rodolfo Dordoni created a modern piece with a fresh language and very propositive, inspirative in the meaning of you can generate many different views of it. So it depends on the combination of the fabrics or colors that you select. And this is a chair, armchair, and a beautiful lounge, very comfortable, who he designed it for us.
Rodolfo, you know, really understands the market and understands that designers like to customize. So the fact that he designed a chair that any designer that's specifying it could put their hand on it and make it their own. So it's great to have those options. But Jesus, I actually have to say that I know we could continue on for much longer with our conversation, but I would love to say muchas gracias for your time and your insight really into the sustainable mission set by Andreu World. And of course, to our lovely audience out there, I would like to ask you to please make sure to check out the Andreu World website to learn more about their sustainability practices and of course, their new product introductions. Adios.
Thank you very much.
Hey design friends, this is Cindy Allen, editor-in-chief of Interior Design, and today we are celebrating the 16th year of the Shaw Contract Design Awards. Yep, 16 amazing years. It's become a serious global design competition, and today we're going to talk to our good friends at Shaw, two of the judges. We're going to get the inside scoop and see some of the winning projects. And it all starts now. I want to introduce my friends that have joined today. With me is Todd Jarvis, he's the Global Marketing Director at Shaw Contract. He's out of Atlanta. How are you, Todd?
Doing great. Good to see you, Cindy.
And we have two judges, Christine Craik. She's the Associate of Interior Design at Cashin Architecture from Vancouver, Canada. Yes, Canada is in the house. Hi, Christine.
Hello.
And Brad Robichaud, he's Senior Interior Designer at Stantec, and they're out of Texas. Hi, Brad. Nice to see you again.
Hi, Cindy.
Looking at the winners, I was pretty excited. It seemed like a very good year, Todd, huh?
It was fantastic. And, you know, Cindy, looking back on the Design Awards this year, I was really struck with how emblematic of our mantra of people together, planet forever in this year's Design Awards. We've got these 4 ambitions around material health, circular economy, diversity, equity, inclusion, and carbon impact. And again, I was just struck with how each of those ambitions were really represented in the Design Awards.
So it's been 16 years. And, you know, I always say, like, sometimes like a good idea, after it's become successful, it always seems like has existed forever, right? Because it's such a good idea. But the truth of the matter is, it starts small and it gets nurtured, it gets developed, it gets bigger, and then it becomes like a thing, right? So Todd, just give us one little story about the growth of these awards. Let us see what it looked like when it started.
This has really grown over the last 10 years into such a global program. It was primarily a US award program to begin with, and then little by little we started to get more submissions from around the world, and now this year we had over 700 projects from 37 different countries around the globe. And the final winners, we had with 5 countries represented and 4 different continents, so really a diverse group of finalists.
Amazing. And you know, when I see a strong group of winners, I also think about the jury, because you need to have the right jury, honestly, and they need to be very seasoned, have a deep knowledge of what's happening in design, and also an openness to seeing the whole, not just their own view of it. And it's clear that you had a very strong team this year. Tell us, so we're going to talk to Christine and Brad, of course, but tell us who else was participating.
Well, we had 24 judges from 10 different countries judging from the original projects where we look at it from a market segment standpoint. So the diversity of thought there was just amazing. That's one thing that's really impressed me, is kind of being a fly on the wall in all these sessions, is how much the interior designers are willing to listen to each other and sometimes even change their opinions after hearing someone talk about why they love a particular project. We had the final judging. We actually had 5 judges, and Christine and Brad are joining us because of time zones. It's really difficult to include the rest of the world, unfortunately, but I did want to give a shout out to Shu Himatsu from System O Design Consulting in Tokyo, and James Kong from Infinity Design and Engineering in Shanghai, and Norsafina Ibrahim from Kuala Lumpur with Scala Design Consulting.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you all. I know there are a lot of entries, and I know it gets complicated and complex, and just having everyone honestly get along and have good energy to get to really honor some amazing winners. So thank you all. Okay, so we have to get to Christine and Brad. First of all, is this your first time judging the awards?
It is.
Yeah.
It is for me as well. Yes. Yes.
Uh-huh.
First time.
And how did you find the experience?
It was a great experience, not just being able to see all of the projects and experience design from so many different angles and through so many different pairs of eyes, but being able to talk to all the judges worldwide and hear their perspectives. And the projects this year were amazing. It was very, very difficult to narrow it down. Brad, do you feel the same?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I mirror that exact sentiment. It was a bit overwhelming at first, to be honest. I mean, there was such a robust and impressive body of work created by these firms. And so, confronted with the task of narrowing down into finalists and to the final winners, it was definitely a difficult task, but it was actually a lot of fun because, coming from a curious mindset, I love kind of getting inside the brains of other designers and getting to know kind of, and from a geographical region, right? What is kind of the current trend for them versus the US and Tokyo and Shanghai? I mean, it was just really fascinating, even just to talk to them even.
That's great. So, we're going to start, we'll go through the winners. Now, I want you to put your thinking caps on and try to remember some of the inner conversation, or when there was maybe a little bit of, I don't know, a disagreement maybe, but where you got to a good end, okay? But I have to say that I appreciate anybody who's on a jury. We're in the middle of judging our Best of Year awards. And for me, the thing you want the most is to have amazing projects. And that makes it so much harder. So when I hear you, it's heartbreaking. Like, I always say everyone's a winner, but it's not always the case. Okay, so let's get started. So the first winning project, in no particular order, is ABN Group HQ Workplace Fit Out by our good friends Woods Bagot. And this was under large workplace. And this was in Perth, Australia, which, by the way, I lived there a gazillion years ago. So Christine, tell us why you love the project.
Well, this one I read very carefully the narrative that went with it, and something that I really pulled out was just the concept of where together everyone achieves more. And so to me, that I feel like this interior really embodies a sense of family, a sense of togetherness. It offers a lot of opportunities for prospect and refuge. There's places where you can see and be seen, and then other nooks and crannies where you can interact with your teammates and have those quiet conversations. It's done in such a beautiful way, in that a lot of the shapes and the lines are repeated in very subtle ways throughout the whole project, but it doesn't feel repetitive. You have a lot of color and you have a lot of texture. Every space has its own feel, its own character, and yet it fits very, very nicely into the whole. I appreciated in particular the use of the sphere, the use of the softened edged squares throughout the space, and even some of the verticality and the repetitive lines that were used throughout. And I just felt it was very, very strong.
Sometimes, and look, this idea of the curve, which I find very sculptural and very artistic, is definitely a trend these days that we're seeing. But this didn't feel trendy, right? It felt like very sophisticated, very handsome, like it will wear really well. Don't you think so, Brad?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the comments that it was kind of timeless, right? It was soft and timeless is some of the comments that came up in our conversations.
Fantastic. So a great kickoff from around the world, at the other side of the world, a very long plane trip, I must say, to Perth, but congrats to Woods Bagot, who are good friends of the magazine too, by the way. Okay, we've got the second one, also large workplace, is Lydos Global Headquarters by Gensler. And they're a 50-year-old brand, and the word Lydos is clipped from the word kaleidoscope, which served as the inspiration. I know you really like this one, Brad.
I do. I mean, I love a good story, right?
Yeah.
And I think interior design and design in general should really, really tell a really cohesive story and bring the brand to the forefront. Initially, when we were working through these projects, We initially kind of skipped over some of this because compared to some of the others, this was very busy, right? There was just a lot to take in. But once we started to dig into it, we really started to discover quite a bit. And then it became a lot of fun to really look through the photos and kind of see the sequence of moving around the space. And then once we kind of took in that kaleidoscope concept, it really started to pull us in, and it really started to spawn a lot of interesting conversation. Because as you work through some of the photos, you can start to see some of the shapes that look rectangular. As you start to change your perspective, it's a completely
like
different,
a kaleidoscope.
like a kaleidoscope, right? It's a completely different view. But it took us multiple times to look through the photos to really place ourselves in that space. And then once you really place yourself in there, I think that's a really successful project when you can really start to experience through photography.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah, it's true.
It's a beautifully layered and complex design, but because the color palette is so tight, that's what helped to rein it in. And like Brad was saying, at first we thought, oh, there's so much going on here, but really there's not. It's done in a way that is surprisingly subtle, in that they just had the one strong purple color throughout, mixed with a lot of the natural elements, the plants, and those kinds of textures as well, which really softened it and made it feel more residential, almost made it feel homey. In this context of kaleidoscope, which was so strong. Brad and I spent a lot of time looking through these pictures, and oh, look at that one, and oh, look at that line of light. So it was great. There's a lot to digest here, and a lot of thought put into this project.
Super. Todd, I'm going to go to you on third, which is the Park Royal Collection Marina Bay by FDAT Architects in Singapore. This was like a one-of-a-kind garden in a hotel, and I understand you were there before the renovation.
Yeah, this one was really special for me because I've stayed in this property multiple times and didn't realize until I looked a little closer that it was that property. I actually hired somebody in the lobby of that hotel, but it looked completely different than when I stayed there, and really looking forward to getting back there and staying in this beautiful spot. But one thing that really struck me, this hotel was built in the 80s, and actually two of our projects in the final winners are projects that were older than 40 years. So you think about that from a sustainability standpoint, and here we are just a short time after COP26 in Glasgow and the climate conference. You think about the carbon impact and the circular economy impact if those buildings had been demolished and put up new buildings, as opposed to resurrecting them with great interior design. So I think that's really exciting.
This was one of those projects that was impossible not to be like wowed by, right, Christine?
Absolutely. The nest features, the use of metals and woods, and even the stone features. For me, this was one of my favorite projects. I just found that the tension between, the paradox between the big stone vertical elements and the strong detailing in the floor, mixed with these wildly organic and beautiful structures that just drew you in. And it was stunning. And how they used the landscape elements and the plantings themselves as a design feature, not just as an afterthought kind of plunked into planters. It really is a big part of it. The types of plants that were put into the space and their textures, beautifully done. Yeah.
Yeah, that it reminds me of how nature is part of our lives in a completely different way these days. And you just said it. Remember the old days when you have a project and then you like take the orchid and put it on the reception desk or something. I don't know, for the picture. I don't know. Those days are gone, everybody. Thank goodness. Gorgeous project. I'm so glad it is being honored. Okay, I'm going to you next, Brad, for the School of Rock Dominicos, and it's a music academy. It's designed by EGBARQ, and it's in the education category, and this is in Chile. Santiago, Chile. So tell us why you love this project so much.
So my background for the last 10 years has been in education design, doing K through 12 and higher ed projects. And so this really resonated with me because, one, it's a unique project type, right? It's a unique program. but it's incredibly engaging without being overstimulating, which is a really difficult thing to do in education design. It's true to the theme. It makes you want to be creative in this space. But I think they implemented a lot of really great detailing that you don't really notice at first glance. And one of the things that I mentioned during our judging process was because there's so many rich colors and saturation of materials, they kept the floor plane relatively neutral. But not only that, they utilized this really clever lighting detail in the base of that corrugated metal wall facade. And what it does is it really creates the contrast between the ultra textured wall and that very neutral floor. So it almost creates like this instant relief for your eyes to kind of rest. And then once we started digging into it a little bit more, the plan is incredibly simple. It is such a simple plan, but the project is so dynamic. And for me, I think it was just really successful.
Are you going to talk about the containers?
The containers are great. I mean, I think containers are one of those things that, copy and paste. They've been utilized in every project, in every project type you can think of. However, it really became less of a unit, like an object. And they really used it in strategic ways to make it look like a wall finish, right? That corrugated metal wall finish, rather than just entering into a small container object.
That's what I liked. That's what I liked when you looked like a real hallway. It didn't necessarily look like these object. I kind of liked, and I don't know if I'm seeing all the images, but I kind of like that you think of spaces where they're making music sometimes as sort of like dark, quiet places, but then you go into these rooms and there's all these windows and all this light coming in. I really love that contrast.
Yeah, I agree. And the graphic design on this project was amazing. I think they did such a great job of implementing, graphic design in this project with all of that texture, right? Because this project could have just gone wild in so many ways, but I think they used such constraint in kind of the organization of the project. That
I love that you said that, because seeing a project where you could kind of feel it could go wrong, but it went really right. So big kudos to them. Okay, so number 5. By the way, all the names are hard. So I'm like, sorry, everybody, they're long and hard. So number 5 is Sumitomo Mitsuds DS Asset Management Company Limited by Signal Inc. And this category was medium for the medium workplace, so mid workplace. And this was in Minato City in Tokyo. And the inspiration was the Japanese house and the garden, which is a big inspiration these days, this sort of residential, like, are you at home or are you at work, right, Christine?
Yeah, I felt it was a very timely design, coming back to the traditional Japanese home and the Japanese garden. It's timely in that we're all working from home or going into the office intermittently. We're trying to figure out this hybrid workspace and how this is going to work, and how do we make our employees feel at home and feel comfortable in the workplace. And this was just so beautifully done, from the way the furniture layouts were put together, that they're centered in the room, from the beautiful ceiling details with plantings suspended in the air. But it was done in a way that very, very clear focal points in each space. I think everyone appreciated as well, just the layering of light and the texturing of light in these spaces in unexpected ways, whether it's coming from, a little crack in the wall, a little line of LED just peeking out from between 2 beautiful pieces of wood, or, highlighting a ceiling, or, near the floor or in the garden itself. And yeah, very, very nicely done, very creative. Yeah.
I mean, what's not to love about Japanese design?
I know, right? I know. Todd, I want to pull you into this a little bit. What was it like? Because you must have been very excited. Look, post, it's not post-COVID, but like post the most serious part, like you're in the middle of this and you don't really know what to expect. You don't know what kind of projects are going to come in. You don't know what's finished, what's been photographed. Like this was a tough one. And then to see this work sort of like kind of rise up, it was, I don't know, I was very, very excited seeing the projects.
Yeah, and you know, this is the second year where we've done the design awards completely virtually, and we don't know what next year is going to hold. We hope that it can come back to some kind of a hybrid of face-to-face, as well as we love that we can have more judges participate with the virtual aspect of it. So we don't know exactly what it's going to look like next year or what our world's going to look like. But you know, one thing that really caught me on the last project, and Brad and Christine, you may remember, Shu from Japan made a comment. There was a shot of a conference room, and there was absolutely no technology in the room. There were no outlets, there were no, and he talked about the human aspect of it. It was just to meet face to face and to be able to talk as humans. And as much as we've enjoyed, you know, doing this virtually, really excited about the opportunity for that human face to face interaction that we'll hopefully get into in 22.
And if there's anything we've learned, and I know we think like this too, is that like because we've missed a lot of, you know, in-person events, and certainly we miss everybody. And then, but this is what's come out of it. Like now you have a different kind of juror that may well always be someone who's doing it virtually while you still have the you know, in person. So that's exciting. That's exciting. And just the way that everyone's like kind of adapted. And what came out of it, great projects, great winners, great conversation. Exciting. So I want to thank you guys for that. Okay. All right. So now we're up to People's Choice. And the winner is also in Japan, and it's called The Campus by Kikuyu Company Limited. And it's under Large Workplace. And it's an experimental site for the future of work.
It would be a great and fun place to work, looking at the photos, and you know, the People's Choice is chosen on our website. It's open for everyone to vote, and this project received over 4 times more votes than the next closest finisher. So there was really a lot of great support for this project in Tokyo.
Brad, did you guys also, were you guys in conversation about this project?
We did, yeah. I mean, we had a lot of conversation about pretty much every project that was submitted. But what I think is really interesting and intriguing is that, you know, the 4 or 5 judges that were, you know, selecting these final projects, the mindset was different. Than I love seeing what the greater audience thinks about these projects. I mean, I just think that's so intriguing. And looking at this project again, it's definitely one that we were you know, discussed pretty heavily. And I think what stood out for me was there was so many choices of space. Right. There was the outdoor community space, but even internally, there were so many different options to kind of choose your own place. There were kind of shadier, darker, more intimate spaces. There were some that were a little bit more active and activated and engaging. And there were some that were just kind of felt like you're in, you know, a Zen garden, a playground, a retail space. I mean, it was almost like every sector wrapped into one cohesive project.
Was this is this a co-working space?
Live work.
I believe so.
Yeah. And Christine, let me ask you something about this. Why do you think it was, how would you frame this as like, why, you know, online, it was the project that people responded to versus judges who dig into every project, who study the narrative, look at all the pictures, look at it from every viewpoint. This one was just like a clear winner for the people.
You know, we talked a lot about this project in particular, and mostly just because of the concept. You know, you have a public that are coming into the workplace. They have public areas on the ground floor where people are, you know, coming in and out. So you're bringing the community into your workplace, and people who are living there, people who are working there, eating there, their whole lives are centered around this campus. And it really is. I think we've had a year and a half of, we've had a lot of isolation. We've had a lot of people stuck at home, a lot of people working from home and only seeing other people on a Zoom screen. And the idea of being a part of a community again, I think really speaks to a lot of people. It speaks to me. And, and the way it was designed, like Brad had mentioned about having lots of options, these spaces are so flexible, and you can just see how much longevity this project would have, over time. Spaces can change. They can become this, they can become that, become whatever the community needs it to be. And having flexibility in architecture and interior design is everything right now. Yeah.
Well, bravo to the people. Todd, I want to ask you, sort of as we close, when you see a global perspective of what's happening in design, and then you look at Shaw and you say this actually is representing what's happening within us as well, right? Give us a little recap of what you're most proud of.
I think the diversity of the projects is really something to be proud of, and how this has grown, as we said, around the globe, so many countries represented, and it's a big initiative for us. I think we've had some of the US jurors in the past didn't realize we were a global company, and just hopeful that opens eyes, that if people are working on projects in other parts of the world, we're able to serve them anywhere they want to go.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, I want to ask Brad and Christine. Okay, so you're judging, right? But you're also designers, you're working on projects. What thing were you a little jealous about that you were like, oh, I want to do that, or I want to have the opportunity to do that in my next project, or I don't know, give me one little tidbit.
Oh gosh, Brad first.
Well, specifically one, the one that was kind of biophilia gone wild. It was like the sheer budget, right? The budgets to be able to produce something so comfortable and so natural, where you could just put yourself, just looking at a photograph, put yourself in the space, almost hear the air conditioner as a breathe, right? The birds in the cage, like the auditory, the tactile, it's such an experience. So some of these we were like, that was an amazing budget. That is like the dream budget, right? But with other regions comes different restrictions, right? That we're, different levels of elevation within a space that, sometimes in the US and North America, we're not, we're kind of held to a more stricter standard for accessibility, of course. So
I love that. No, but that's so honest, because, I hear that about projects overseas all the time from American firms. They're like, we would never be able to do that project here. Mm-hmm. So that was a really good answer. Christine, what's something that kind of inspired you?
Well, for me, I loved, especially with the international projects, just the liberal use of space. There were a lot of, I think in North America in particular, we focus a lot on efficiency of space. Every square foot must have a purpose. And some of the projects, especially in Japan, just had this looseness of space and this beautiful negative space that we commented a few times actually on the juror panel. Just it would be so nice to just have this width of corridor or this height of space that really seems unnecessary, seems like it wouldn't be used, but it has a purpose. It just the way it feels and the way it must help people to interact and just create these interesting interactions between people. Yeah, I guess the use of space, like being able to have more square footage to work.
I get it.
Yes, and creating
I totally get
palette, right? The negative space, positive space, and
Yeah, because that is the thing that I love hearing that from you guys, because it is honest. You're working on your projects and like, oh my God, that's amazing. I wish we had some of that or had that space or that opportunity. But thank you for your care and your thoughtfulness to these projects. We all know what it takes to get it accomplished, to get it finished, and so really having judges who really care makes all the difference in the world. And Todd, I want to thank you for this kind of commitment from Shaw, 16 years in the making. Now it really is a thing, like a big thing. And just so I don't forget, tell everyone how they could, if they want to go online to look at all the winners, what do they do?
Sure, just come to shawcontract.com and click on the design navigation, and you'll see a bunch of information there under Design Awards. And I do want to leave one quick word from Fina from Malaysia. Talked about, thank you for making design fun again. It was kind of, they remembered, oh, this is why we're in this. This is why it's such a fun profession. So
I love that. It's the perfect note to close. Thank you all. I can't wait to see them all. Really, we won't probably see them all in person, but we'll see them online. And then I can't wait for number 17. It's around the corner, Todd. You better start working on it already.
Already started.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you all so much. Big hug to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to Shaw Contract.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tina Brennan. I'm Vice President of Marketing at Metropolis. This is the 7th year for Metropolis's Think Tank series, a thought leadership program that visits top firms in key markets in North America. In February, we were in Atlanta. In April, Chicago. In May, we went to Austin, Minneapolis, and Denver. In July, we were in San Francisco, October, New York, and now we find ourselves in Los Angeles. Today, we're very pleased to be hosted by HMC Architects out of Los Angeles. We'll be exploring how Gen Z will impact the design of the modern office and university, including new approaches to mobility, flexibility, sustainability, tech, and community. We hope you'll join us for future thought-provoking discussions as well. Next week, we'll be hosted by Huntsman's Architectural Group. The registration URL can be found in chat. Discussions from today's panel will be recorded and aired on DesignTV by SANDOW and then available for viewing on demand on Metropolis's website. Today's panel is CU accredited through AIA and IGCEC. If you did not request accreditation when you registered, please send an email to webinars@metropolismag.com. We will not be using the raised hand function or chat today. For any questions to the moderator or panelists, we welcome questions at any time, please use the Q&A feature. There's also an upvote so that you can select the questions that you would like to see answered first. Hosting an event like this requires the support of great firms like HMC Architects and our incredible sponsors. We'd like to thank Certainty, show-stopping ceilings and walls that achieve the extraordinary for every space and every budget, and Growy, designing and engineering innovative water products for bathroom solutions and kitchen fittings. Today's panel discussion will last approximately an hour and a half. And now I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Metropolis's executive editor, Sam Labelle. Sam?
Thank you. Thanks, Tina. I appreciate it. And very much excited to be part of this discussion and to have a great team of panelists here. We were just talking about how, I guess I'm a Gen Xer. And when I first, my generation first came on the scene, I think there was, some eye rolling and people were sort of getting used to what that all meant. And Samantha is one of our panelists, said she's a millennial, and she got the same thing when she first came on. And now here we are. Now we're experiencing Gen Z, and Gen Z just kind of making its way into universities and into the workplace. A very different generation, a bit much more racially and ethnically diverse than previous generations. they've, as we know, been through a lot more unrest in recent years, both environmentally and socially, much more technologically fluent. They, basically grown up with the internet and to a large extent with mobile devices that we kind of, only wondered at when they first came. They just sort of took them for granted. So it's a very different generation, and their impact could be, it already is being felt and could be profound in the office and the university, obviously elsewhere as well. So we have a great panel to talk about kind of looking at those impacts. And they include Samantha Eklund, who's a project manager interiors at HMC, and John Richardson, who's a senior project designer and principal at HMC. And hopefully we will also be joined by Joel Peterson, Director of Facilities at Glendale Community College. Oh, here he is. Good timing, Joel. Excellent. Excellent.
My apologies.
No worries. You made a perfect timed entrance. So thank you for participating. So those are the panelists, and our sponsors, as Tina mentioned, are Certainteed and GROA. And yeah, we're excited to have all of you be on board with this. And so Joel, you just got here just in time for me to ask you a question, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So as I was mentioning earlier, Gen Z have just started kind of coming into universities and into workplaces. And you're seeing that obviously from the university perspective. So tell me about, how have you noticed that their needs are different, and how are you sort of adapting your facilities there and your planning there in response to that?
That's a very interesting question, and just a little bit of background. I think I have some insight into this on a couple of fronts. One is my PhD is in higher education administration, and a lot of the components of my research was focused on was some of the underlying trends, both demographically and otherwise, that is impacting higher education. And some of that has a lot to do with what's happening. So for the first time in American history, we are facing, the higher education industry is facing a declining college-going population. And this is putting all sorts of different pressures, one of which is trying to bring more competitive for recruiting and admissions. And different generations are attracted by different things. Secondly, with the pandemic, we had to kind of fast forward, accelerate into sort of the Gen Z environment because we had to be remote for so long. And so what we found is that probably coming out of the pandemic, that the new normal is going to be catering to something that Gen Z already wants, which is they want choice, they want adaptability, and they want to have an integration of technology as well as the traditional in-person. So on the facility side, we are putting in what we call a high flex environment for our classes and laboratories that allows instructors to be able to do simultaneous in-person instruction as well as to have remote instruction. And the challenges there is not just putting cameras into a room and or having microphones, but it's also, think of me, the idiot, having troubles getting into this seminar, and trying to make sure that 30 or 40 students can be in both physical and remote, and that you don't have somebody with the echo thing going on. And as we all know, the hardest challenge has been in these facilities has been the audio side of it, which I think we all in our various webinars and Zoom meetings come to realize is that half the time you can't hear people. And it's a real challenge when you have them in a large room environment.
Yeah, that's definitely often the problem is the audio. So you're it sounds like you're saying some of the things that we keep talking about, the effects of the pandemic and how it's kind of forced this hybrid workplace, but it sounds like this is something that was, in a way, Gen Z to some extent was sort of forcing these change. To some extent is already changing as well, but that was something that they were already looking for before this came.
That's correct. For instance, the University of Chicago was already for the last over 5 years have been implemented as high flex environment. And so some of the lessons learned that they had have been informing the rest of us. But part of that was being driven by the fact that the Gen Z students wanted to have a different modality than the historical, just simple in person. The other part of the high flex is it's not just a matter of having people in the classroom and remote at the same time, but what we found is that Gen Z loves to be able to have video snippets. And so it isn't good enough just to record the class that they have to then go back through and figure out. But we're in the process of producing a number of pilot videos, ultimately to have an entire video library that would support the entire academic program. So any instructor could have various programs so that they have tools that they can utilize on an asynchronous basis. Students could look at this prior to a class or after a class to see something repeatedly to get an example of how a lab might work or something. So these are the kind of technologies and modalities that Gen Z was already putting pressure on institutions to do, and that was accelerated then by the pandemic.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. And John, when you guys work in a lot of workplaces and a lot of universities, and obviously, as Joe was mentioning, technology is a huge part of adapting for Gen Z and adapting for life during and after the pandemic, hopefully after the pandemic. But so that's something I want to ask you about in how you're sort of honing and changing your approaches to tech, but also just in general, these are things like wanting to incorporate more community, certainly flexibility. These are all things that we're all talking about, but I think, as Joel said, these are things that newer generations are demanding. Were demanding even before the pandemic started. So how is your approach as a designer and sort of in putting these spaces together changing?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And just first, I wanted to give a shout out and a thank you to any vets who are out there today listening to this.
Yes.
It's Veterans Day, so thank you.
Good point. Agreed.
Yeah. When talking about Gen Z, I really think it's important to kind of define terms, and understand who we're talking about, and not only who we're talking about, but putting aside assumptions that can sometimes be negative. And, I say that because I think millennials, even if it was kind of in a joking format, I think it kind of became an easy target to focus on perceived shortcomings of the millennial generation as they matriculated through higher ed and the workplace. And that really doesn't serve a positive purpose when we're planning for kind of new, reimagined, inclusive environments for both learning and workspaces. And maybe COVID has given us an opportunity not only, again, to kind of rethink moving forward higher ed and workplace design for all participants, but it's giving us an opportunity to incorporate kind of the most positive aspects of Gen Z and what they can bring to the mix. So kind of in terms of like defining who is this Gen Z group, it's typically people born from 1995 to 2010, so kind of basically 10-year-olds to 25-year-olds at this point. They're oftentimes referred to as digital nativists. They're kind of the first group of people who've never known a world without the internet, without instant access to knowledge, entertainment, music, education, etc. So a slightly different take from millennials. And with that, I think there are some, again, it's easy to focus on maybe some more negative thoughts or assumptions about them. I'll just give you a few. One is that that, you know, statistically, they're spending 8 or more hours a day in front of a screen or multiple screens. And I think that leads people to think that they're just lazy. When in fact, you know, a Gen Z person could have a TV going on in the background. They're texting, they're chatting on their iPad with somebody, they're posting to social media, all while doing work on the computer that's related to school or to their job. So, you know, if you want to look at it in a positive light, that's they're multitaskers. They're independent managers of their time. Another criticism might be that they're not ambitious. They just want to game in the basement all day and not really engage in society. And you know, they're actually a very well educated group. Now, where they're getting their higher education delivery, be it on a campus or online, statistically they're more engaged. 1 out of every 2 Gen Zs is seeking higher education, and that compares with millennials, which was 1 in 3. They're also prone to having the mindset of being gig workers. I saw a statistic that, you know, instead of flipping burgers while you're in high school, fully like 19% of teens who are engaged in work are doing it online. They're doing it through things like Etsy or eBay. Maybe they're monetizing their podcasts, or they're promoting their skill set. Maybe they're digital refinishers or DJs. Again, so they're really engaged in this kind of online work environment at a very, to me anyway, a very young age. With respect to gaming, yeah, there's certainly a subculture that's big into gaming, but it's important and interesting to note that gaming is now, or esports is now a college recognized sport. You can get college scholarships based on being part of being a good gamer. You can even make a career if you're kind of a top level gamer. And whether or not you're at the top of the game or just a casual gamer, you know, there's some common traits that I think we all value. Like, you know, you need to have teamwork, collaboration, leadership. You're focused on a goal. You're subjected to disappointment. You may lose a game, but you also have that thrill of winning something. So, you know, again, and then games like Minecraft, you know, that teaches spatial awareness at a very young age. And it would be interesting to know what kind of influence a game like Minecraft has on maybe directing people towards careers in architecture and interior design. So I think there's certainly very positive things that come out of the gaming culture. And then I think finally, you know, there's this idea that they're a very restless group. You know, that they're not fully engaged with the working world or academic world, and they're not going to be really committed to employers as they progress. And I think, you know, partly that's true when you look at statistics. It's you know, the projections are something like every 2 years, Gen Zs are going to be switching jobs, and then every 8 years, I believe, they're going to be switching careers entirely. And you know, that's obviously a employee retention and attraction is certainly a responsibility we all have as designers, and it's a management challenge as well. But you know, the positives of that kind of mindset really is that they're self-reliant, they're mobile, they're agile, they're quick, they probably have done better than most of us during the stay-at-home, whether it be learning or work from home. They like to I think they like to have their work mean something and contribute towards something that serves the greater good, whether it's the environment, volunteerism, their communities. So in short, I mean, they're very hard workers given the right environment.
So that must really have an impact on your design or how you're thinking about design. If you have a whole new kind of mindset coming in, a new clientele and new employees coming too.
Yeah, it is challenging with respect to. I think the first impact, you kind of just start with the basics, and I think our approach to design, to programming, really has to expand to be more inclusive with who's invited to the table when we're talking about new projects, the amenities those projects will have, and what goals are trying to be achieved. So that planning process becomes a larger representative group than just having a few stakeholders that may come from senior leadership at a campus or a firm, and really spread that investigation and participation out to a much broader group, including Gen Z persons.
Right. Right. That's an interesting point. And I think that kind of inclusive kind of mindset just changes everything, as far as we're just used to a certain way of decisions being made top down, I guess you could call it, although that's changed. But I think it's changed to an extent that now it's almost non-existent. And so that changes, I'm sure, how you're designing. And for you have to take more stakeholders perhaps into account.
More stakeholders, like you said, kind of almost a bottom-up approach in a sense. I can give you an example. We recently completed a math and science building on a college campus located in the LA area. And the formal program called for 32 classrooms or labs and a work lab. And by incorporating this kind of bottom up approach to interviewing user groups, including students, we ended up carving out of this space. We added 22 informal spaces for students, primarily for students to gather either individually or together in varying levels of privacy, openness, space, etc. And it really helped engage, I think, and if we're looking at future-proofing buildings,
right,
providing those types of amenities that might only come from speaking to those cohorts.
Right. That's fascinating. Really fascinating. And Samantha, you're working mainly on interiors, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I'm wondering how this kind of this generation that John's talking about, that certainly has a new approach to, and I think social media has an impact on that. How it's like less top down, more everybody has a say, but also just the flexibility that we're talking about, the sort of kind of different just growing up in a totally different culture. How did certainly a more visual culture, and Instagram has to, there's technology's kind of has an impact on all of this. That's why I bring those up. But how does that change your approach? If are you doing new types of lighting approaches, new types of color, obviously new types of technology embedded into the work? How do you find things slowly starting to shift?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say that honestly, our overall approach probably hasn't changed, because as designers, we should always be, like John said, kind of anticipating the needs of the next population.
Yeah.
I don't think that any of us are really surprised by kind of what we've seen grow out of this Gen Z population, like just the ever importance of technology and how it really plays a role in their day to day. I think as I said, as a firm, we really want to be seen as a trusted and valued resource for all of our clients when they are planning for the future. And that's why opportunities like this are so important, just to be able to kind of to speak to each other and to understand what's important to Joel, and kind of what he's seeing in his world. I mean, I will say, like, as humans, we know that we have our basic everyday needs that have always been laid out for us, by Maslow and the hierarchy of needs. But certainly, like, our needs will forever change as as our society progresses, and as we respond to like major world events and major pivotal happenings that are occurring. And really at HMC, like, we really kind of prioritize focusing on the actual end user and what their particular needs are, and making sure that everything that we do impacts them positively and also reflects them. So when you're looking at Gen Z as this future user group, they're kind of they're a population that is certainly like striving to create an environment and a culture that there's not a lot of rules to, and they want to be bold. And they don't really want to be labeled. They don't want to be put in a box. And I think that right now in our world, we're seeing a lot of these really broad, non-specific labeling that has definitely come into play because of that generation. And for us as designers, when we translate all of that into our current spaces, you end up having these rooms and spaces that are super flexible and that really speak to the fluidity that generation is craving. And honestly, we also, like you said, we have to create spaces that look really good on Instagram.
Yeah, that doesn't hurt. That doesn't hurt. That is interesting. That, I mean, obviously this is part of your approach always. As John mentioned earlier when we were preparing for this, we don't know for sure what's going to happen with Gen Z. It's still early. The top end of the population is still in their early to mid 20s. So we're still kind of learning about that. But one thing that is for sure, and this is something that one of the audience, Trevor Allen, mentioned, is that Gen Z are definitely disruptors. They do like to change things. They've opened up a lot of new opportunities, and it's sort of, I think the impetus is probably on us to learn from that. And I think that there's a lot of design lessons from that I'm sure that that you're learning. And one of them that's an interesting question is, we were also talking about this earlier, because I remember Tina was saying before how she remembers being in cubicles back in the day. I do too, by the way. I'm sure a couple of you guys do as well. And then we went to the open office, and this is a question not just about Gen Z, but about now that we're moving out of COVID. I imagine folks in Gen Z are not quite ready to go back to cubicles, but they're also not quite maybe ready, or any of us, to go straight to the completely open office. So, what is next there in the office? What is next for how it's designed, and how might this new generation impact that? That's a question for anybody who wants to answer.
Yeah, I'll jump in with some thoughts. Those are some challenges. And I think we really, when we're talking about flexibility, we really have to kind of define that as between current and future educational delivery methods and different office work modalities, and what is the nature of those spaces. And I think what they have in common, both education and workspaces, is when you're talking about change, there's just an inherent fear of normative changes that may threaten, especially very hierarchical organizations. Some are much more open to change. Others are seeking to change and pivot from hierarchy to a more flattened, contemporary work and learning environment. But at the heart of it, people still think about themselves. What about my private office? Am I going to lose that? What about the Google effect? Is there going to be an office dog and people on scooters? I don't want to work, in that kind of environment. What about the auditory environment? Is it going to be noisy? And then inevitably, when working with user groups, someone will bring in, and I'm sure many people can relate to this, an article about why the open office is just terrible. or
Mhm.
in the case of education, why lecture halls are not an engaging form of educational delivery. It's boring. But there are also opportunities to satisfying both, I think, Gen Z motivators, satisfying those, as well as creating a space for a broad range of people. And I think we've, all of us, having worked from home, have really gotten used to having control of your environment. I think that's attributed more towards Gen Z, your own music, etc. But same, at least my experience working at home, there's no debates about the temperature. It's just like I like it, the lighting level, the auditory level. I have control of my workplace, and it's kind of a choose your own adventure approach when we translate that to the future of workplace design. That the workplace design incorporates maybe a hierarchy of uses or a multitude of uses, that there are areas that are programmed for cafe, social interactions. There's we space, there's me space, there's a maker space, there are quiet zones. And then I think looking outside of the traditional building shell, we can look at investments in the outdoors. We've talked for many years in the education sector about the importance of the connection to the outdoors as part of the healing process. And I think we're seeing that, especially like with Gen Z's kind of hyper focus on the environment and outdoors,
Right.
that green spaces, both in educational facilities, especially if it's an urban campus, as well as workplaces, leveraging that real estate to incorporate being able to work and learn out of doors.
Right. That's a great point. And there is, I think, that we all have that desire for the outdoors, having been cooped up for however many months now, for, not completely, but, to a large extent. And, and Gen Z, just the aspect of technology, as we're saying, this fluency in technology, and everybody has talked a little bit about how the technology has been embedded into, hybrid working and hybrid learning. And it's certainly the fact that, kids growing up, including, my nephews, and they're younger part of Gen Z, but the collaboration all happening remotely, and how weird that can be. I've been working at Metropolis now for several months, and basically I've only met a couple of people in person. It's all remote. And so then there's that challenge of, even in the hybrid workplace, and especially in the remote workplace, how do you get that collaboration, that real collaboration going, that genuine collaboration? And how do you offset the effects of all these incredible technologies, but kind of create a real sense of intimacy and collaboration amidst all that? It seems easy for the pendulum to swing the other way.
I think you just have to be really intentional about, when you are in person, making sure, especially for, these younger generations, that, especially if you're going to have a hybrid kind of workplace environment, when you're in person, making sure that is the point where, there's a lot of actual personal connections to people. Maybe that's where, the networking is really happening within the organizations. Just kind of circling back on the last point about, remote working and what the future is. I think one of the most kind of interesting and puzzling things to me is, when looking at this generation, this will be the first one that will have always been essentially always accessible, when they enter the workplace, because they will always have a cell phone on them, and work is one phone call away. When you look at the younger generations, for them, from millennials on down, what's become a huge priority is that work-life balance. And now all of a sudden, if you are kind of saying, yeah, I can work anywhere, but I'm also always accessible, I'm always available, how do you kind of prevent from backsliding, to kind of the baby boomers, where, was you were at work all day, you put in really long hours, and there wasn't really this great balance to your work and personal life. I think you're muted.
You're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry about
There
that.
you go.
There, everybody does it. Obviously, I'm not a Gen Z because I'm not as technically fluent. Well, that actually brings up the question of how do you, when you're, creating these spaces, and also when Joel and also Samantha and John, when you have, Gen Z, either students coming in or employees coming in, there's also the question of bridging the gap. How you're trying to make these decisions, but you have different ways of looking at the world. How are you working on just communicating with each other in better ways? There's issues of fluency in tech, there's attention span issues, there's all sorts of problems with doing that. Is it something that's come up for you?
And I think one thing that it's a little bit of a backtrack and touching on what John had said and Samantha.
Yeah, please.
But your comments also bring to fore is with Gen Z, the thing that we're noticing, at least in our environment, is Gen Z is much more female prominent, particularly on college campuses. If you take all of post-secondary education together as an overall thing, it's almost 70% female. And a typical female going to a 4-year school will about 80% of them graduate, and those that do graduate in 4 years. But for the typical male Gen Z that goes to a 4-year institution, 60% never graduate. And the 40% that do take on average 6.5 years. So it's a very different kind of environment. And so partly that has driven, and the facility side of things, the physical environment, women desire more types of aesthetics in some ways. They are concerned about safety. So, and talking about inclusion and so forth, and well before the state has recently in California passed a law to mandate this, but I had instituted at institutions that I have been at where, I couldn't believe that we had vending machines in women's restrooms for, hygiene products. And I'm like, we don't charge for toilet paper. I mean, 50% of our species is female, and this is the normal part of being female. Why would we go ahead and charge these people for this? And so I got rid of all the vending machines and had free dispensers, and a choice of product, because it's just the kind of environment that when you have 70% of the student body is female, you have to be aware of these things. The lactation rooms that we've had to set up all over places, as it should be. And the first few that I'd seen were like, it was like, why would you punish some woman by sticking them into effectively a broom closet so that they can go ahead and do this thing? So, we try to make them into large, comfortable spaces, et cetera. But coming back to the class, back to the office, back to the classrooms, and our staff and employees, one of the key things that they were very concerned about, and particularly our female employees, was things like air quality. So we have backfilled with bipolar ionization systems in all our HVAC systems. We've upgraded all our filtration to at least MERV 13 or higher, because they're very concerned about wanting to have things filtered out at the 0.3 micron level type of thing to be protected. And then also to get into a less, how do you avoid touching surfaces? So we have retrofitted like all our ADA entrances with not only the press bars, but where you can just wave a hand or something in front to have the doors open without having to make any physical contact. And these are sort of very tangible type of things. And many of that is what we have seen is that our students who are Gen Z are more hyper aware of this, of the gender equality and inclusiveness, particularly of women, but across all types of people in all walks of life and all orientations. And then very concerned about the sanitation, the cleanliness, which is titled, I think to some extent, their passion for environment. They're now passionate about their internal environment as much as they are about their external one.
Wow, that's an amazing fact about the women versus men in universities. I didn't have any idea about that, how that was shifted.
Almost always, if you go to a major university college's website and they look at enrollment, you'll almost always see where it'll say women are at like 58.9% or something like that. The magic number is 60. Men and women don't want to go to a single gender institution. They know the world is 50-50 and they want to have that experience. So admissions people game their numbers a lot about when they measure how many people they put on wait lists so that they can not say that they're enrolled, so that they can keep below the magic number of 60%. But the reality is that actually many institutions much higher than that.
Wow. Well, I think, I mean, what that really brings up really well, I think we can talk about the communication a little later, because that brings up a really, I think, important point, which is, I mean, you're designing, I think the point you were saying about designing like the dispensers, like designing more for inclusivity, like that's a great example of that, taking into account everybody's needs and really being sensitive to that. And then that makes, that's a question I have, Samantha and John, for you guys as well, is how else do you design for inclusivity, you know, as that becomes more prevalent, as you know, the generations become more diverse and they become more, it's more important that you acknowledge all the different ways that we are, and stop ignoring that. How do you better design for that as new generations come?
Gosh, this has been something that, you know, we've been putting into K through 12 schools for years, and definitely higher ed. And I'd love to see it, you know, get into the workplaces. But, you know, we've always been talking about, you know, this 21st generation classroom or 21st century learning. And, you know, it's all about kind of honoring and respecting, you know, where the students are and kind of adapting the space and making it so that, like John said earlier, you can choose your own adventure. You know, if you know this is time that you need to sit down and focus, there's a space for that. If you need, you know, a little more help, there's kind of a touchdown space over here where you can, you know, huddle up with somebody who's there, you know, specifically to help you. But I think it's all about just respecting that everybody's different, and everybody does need a little bit of customization, or just the ability to customize the space for themselves.
Right. That it's inclusive to the extent where you're giving them that choice and that ability to do that. Because flexibility, it's a really good point. It's not just about, oh, we can change the space, but it can adapt to your needs. That's a really good point. And John, I'm really curious about this point of inclusivity as far as, you know, other ways that you can, I don't know if that's a conversation you guys have been having as a firm, but it's something that we have been, or, you know, everybody is, I think, wrestling with this. And obviously design can play a role in that.
Yeah, definitely. You know, and kind of tying it back to Gen Z, one of their characteristics is they're very open and honest. They're transparent about not only about themselves, who they are. They're much more accepting than previous generations, and they've been exposed to, you know, really kind of the whole diversity of the human species, sexuality and identity, and you know, to that extent, I you know, I don't know that you know, maybe hopefully as they influence the design of space, these kinds of issues will no longer, it's almost kind of like green, you know, green design. It used to be a thing that you'd add on as an added value. Now it's just how you do business. I think as the workforce and academia becomes more diverse and more accepting, you know, something that's just really exciting is that people can pursue and be kind of their genuine selves. You know, it's that the idea of pursuit of happiness, and You know, in terms of the workplace, I guess I'll go back to, you know, the idea of choice, you know, and really making the case, you know, this is getting a little off topic, but making the case for, you know, getting a degree on campus, accomplishing work in an office. So what? What is the compelling reason for people to come together, to collaborate, to communicate, to form bonds in a physical environment? And I think that's, you know, that's a real challenge moving forward. Not an insurmountable one, but it will take a sea change in perhaps older generations' view of how the workforce is, who comprises the workforce, what they want, and how these spaces need to respond to that. Again, kind of going back to this choose your adventure idea of in the workplace. How do I feel today? Do I need to do focused work? Do I need to come in, first of all? If I do I need to do focused work, group work? Do I just need some social connections? And, you know, really giving compelling reasons, almost thinking of the office, not so much as an office, but as a resource center or an innovation center, if you will. And that's the reason you go in. Yeah, I might have cool furniture and nice amenities, but like, what's the humanistic reason to get me out of my bedroom and into the office?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think this is the first generation that we're going to see that is going to make a choice on where to work. You know, it's not going to just be about salary. It's going to be about, you know, feeling like they believe in the company's purpose and feeling like they actually enjoy working there and enjoy the culture that's created. And it's really hard to feel a strong connection to that culture, you know, when everything is digital and you're not there in person ever. So I think there does have to be a little bit of a hybrid, like we've been talking about. And I mean, I think now this is just an even bigger case for why the design of a space is probably one of the most important or probably biggest factors that HR, you know, has now to really like to attain and you know, retain and attract, you know, future employees.
Right. Just going to point out that some of the design challenges that we've been seeing, we have currently about $330 million of new construction going on, some in the design stage still, and the inclusive part. I mean, such things as it becomes difficult sometimes. So we wanted to go and put in, you know, infant changing tables in every restroom. Problem was that it would then violate the ADA regulations and for access, and trying to meet that, because now it has to be at a certain height, it can't be a certain kind of thing, it needs to be fixed, etc., and the clearances wouldn't be there. Or even if we wanted to put in things like you know, hygiene dispensers, they would violate, because they aren't designed, most of them, they were aftermarket items, they're not designed to be mounted inside of a recessed area. You can't access them easily, and so then they violate ADA access by sticking out too far from the wall.
Right.
California. So you end up having these major issues, and then, you know, how many, there are no specific codes, at least in California, for instance, it's a requirement for gender neutral bathrooms. There's no requirement that says how many you should have. And so there's a lot of debate then among stakeholders on how many is enough and where should they be inconvenienced. And then we've had to have discussions about, well, we only have a male and female locker rooms for our students. Do we have some other kind of thing? And if so, then how do we split that? And what? So these are things that we've been grappling with on a very physical design basis for our existing and future facilities that really go to the heart of inclusion, not just on a male-female, but on a human basis. You know, obviously, we've been working on it with various cultures and so forth by
trying to incorporate different kinds of design, naming factions for our buildings. We've been using more native nomenclature for some of our buildings, et cetera. But it really is a fascinating but thorny thing that isn't going to get sorted out super quick. But Gen Z, I definitely have good opinions on it.
Well, it's amazing because it's a really, really good point. You know, you're being pushed perhaps more than any, you know, institutions right now, because you've got a, you know, this younger generation is really there in full force, but you're up against some of the hardest challenges because you're universities and you're, you know, you've got all these regulations going on. Also, universities, you know, they're often these large bureaucracies. It's slow to change. So I can see that being a huge challenge because you know, you've got a generation also that wants things to change fast, you know, and that doesn't always happen in that environment. So that's interesting. By the way, somebody wanted, I got a question from somebody. They wanted you to repeat the stats about, sorry to ask you to do that, but about women versus men in higher ed. So if you don't mind doing that again.
And these are actually dated. Most of the data comes from about the 2010 census. But so what you have is, if you take a look at all post-secondary, so you're looking at trade schools, as technical schools, as well as 2-year and 4-year institutions and graduate schools. We are approaching where about 70% of all post-secondary people pursuing education are female. And then the completion rates are significantly different between males and females. And I use the 4-year rate as an example, where the average female college student that goes to 4-year institution, 80% of them do graduate on a nationwide basis. And on average, they graduate typically 4 years or 4.5 years. But for their male counterparts, they are 60 to 65% never graduate. And those that do are taking up 6.5 years on average, which means some are taking 10 years to graduate. So it's
across all universities, or
no. So when you look at places like, you know, the leading tier places, Stanford and Princeton, Harvard, you don't see these kind of disparities. It is still more female, but when you look across the entire panoply of higher education and post-secondary, so you have many more things today, like nursing training institutions that specialize in things like that, lab technicians, and they are preponderantly populated by women pursuing those kinds of degrees. I think nursing in America right now is only 7%. We have a nursing program in our school, so I know that's only 7% of nurses are men, 93% are women. So it changes the environment, and also for the first time ever, we have more women in corporate America. They're the largest part of the workforce, than, even though the overall workforce is about 50-50 male and female. But when we're talking about corporate Fortune 500 in-office kind of white-collar workers, it tends to skew more towards women. I do think has an impact then on what kind of facilities you need to have. There's issues about the not just safety, but the perception of safety. How people feel about, we've had to do a lot to try to make our getting to the parking lot feel a lot safer, especially after you do daylight savings time goes away and suddenly it gets dark at 4 p.m. Those kind of things become an issue.
Yeah, wow. And that have to have a whole other panel to discuss why things have why that's happened, why we've had this divergence. That's an extreme divergence. That's really interesting, but obviously that informs a lot. And it sounds like, we talk about how, you've got these shifts in gender that's happened, rather drastically, not that it's happened quickly, it's probably been happening slowly over decades, but this change. And then, we switch from cubicles to open offices. We go from having a pandemic, the thing that always comes back is change and flexibility, having flexibility. And that's something I want to hit on a little bit more, is how, the ability to have facilities that can be changed, I think, in a way that you don't have to have a radical renovation that's going to be expensive, and we're talking about sustainability and, you know, in a sustainable way. So how do you create offices? How do you create university campuses that can be changed in a way that's not, you know, that's easier to do, but can have, you know, really efficient and effective coping mechanisms for all these incredible things that are happening?
John can probably speak better to this, but one thing that we've been looking at, and Samantha too, we've been working very closely with our interior design folks. We're trying to shift everything from wired to wireless. So rather than having all this coax going everywhere and having fixed desktop type of equipment, we're trying to move to a full wireless environment that allows every classroom to potentially become a computer lab. The problem is that a lot of the furnishings and the options don't really, they weren't designed to think about that. So you don't have an under-desk storage that's available, ways to secure the laptop so that you can do things quickly, a range of charging stations that are also securable, unlockable, and portable, so that you can change out these things very quickly. That's been a real challenge. And then it's the challenge on the design part, John probably knows better than anyone here, is how you integrate then things like, you know, Wi-Fi access points so that they don't look ugly and break up the super stunning ceiling that you had created, so that you can have the right kind of thing. So it's been interesting to work towards a wireless environment and see how we can make that work.
Right, well, that's a good example. Let's hear Samantha and John. I'm sure this is something you're coming across a lot.
Well, I'll just say two little things, and then I'll let John go because I know he's got lots. But as far as kind of the sustainability approach is concerned, I actually think that's one of the more interesting things is that, you know, in terms of like real estate, we're using so many rooms for more than one function. So, you know, aside from even just materiality and from, you know, not having to, you know, undergo major renovations just to be able to have a space that works for, you know, a new generation, a couple of years. You know, just by looking at your existing footprint and reimagining ways to reuse those rooms or whatever, it's a more sustainable use of the space itself. And then also we've talked a couple of times about, you know, embedding technology, and Joel said like that's really difficult because we don't want to have a design that's completely revolving around, you know, one type of technology that we've really honed in on,
right?
Because technology changes so fast. And especially with our projects, you know, by the time that we get the plans approved and we actually go to bid and we go to construction and everything, we're probably the monitor that we were, you know, incorporating is, you know, that's so beyond and not even relevant anymore. Right. And just obsolete. So instead, we kind of more so have to approach it. How can we provide the infrastructure for ever-changing technologies so that it stays relevant and you don't automatically date, you know, that renovation just based on the technology that was embedded into it.
Right. It's a good point. Really good point. It's got to be frustrating. You go through the whole process and by the time it's done, things are out of date. Yeah. So, and John, it sounds like you're a bit of an expert on this category.
Well, if not an expert, I at least have opinions. Kind of three come to mind, and piggybacking on Sam's earlier comment about leveraging existing spaces for multiple uses, and also kind of building on Joel's statistics about demographics of higher ed campuses with respect to women. You know, we've been in the last several years providing what we used to call lactation rooms. It's been rebranded as wellness rooms, but it's still in fact a room designated for that specific activity. You know, an example is that you could look at, you know, maybe we need to increase the number of wellness rooms on campus, and maybe you open them up and leverage them to not just the breastfeeding lactation function, but it, you know, it becomes an area that's a room that's open to anybody that provides a quiet respite for people who are you know, just from a mental wellness perspective, needing a break in a quiet space to just relax. And I think that's a very valid investment, both in terms of workplace and higher ed dollars, making sure that the people you serve are being thought of with respect to mental wellness and well-being. In terms of higher ed, and this maybe has a little more to do with future proofing, but it's an interesting challenge. When we're talking about engaging, giving people reasons to come back to campus learning, part of that I think has to do with like real life, hands-on engagement rather than just sitting in a classroom and being lectured at. I know there is a trend at least in higher ed for something called the flipped classroom. And that's a concept where the students are responsible to do primarily all the foundational work outside of class time. I think Joel referred to it perhaps as asynchronous learning. I'm responsible on my own time to learn about the Pythagorean theorem, right? And then you use that critical face-to-face time and facilities with the professor to actually do kind of hands-on real-world applications of what you learned rather than just being lectured at. And so what do those spaces look like? They probably need to be flexible, both with respect to infrastructure, maybe raised floors with lots of opportunities for plugins, mobile furniture, monitors. I mean, that's all a dialogue between designers and stakeholders at the college level. That's a direction they're going. And then in the workplace, and I'll kind of tie it into education. It's kind of funny, when we first enter the education system, we're typically in kindergarten. And how are kindergarten classrooms laid out? Well, again, they're set up with basically activity zones, right? And then once you graduate to first grade, you're introduced, at least traditionally, that's when you're introduced to this very rigid layout of the classroom, the front-facing classroom with desks in a row. And we are moving away from that, certainly. And I think that lesson can kind of be learned or applied to how we've been working the last 100 years. You've got your row of desks and you have your assigned workstation. And when our firm, we've been in the last year or so kind of rethinking, like, what does our office of the future look like? And what we landed upon was kind of 4 common office ecosystems within any given space. And we have multiple offices of varying sizes, and they serve different percentages of market types. But there are commonalities to the interior work environment. And what we landed on is these 4 eco zones is, having an area that's a social, relaxed working area that kind of expresses the company's culture. It's multi-purpose. It's made for short-term use and interaction. The second one is an area for innovation and creativity. Again, kind of reflecting what people are bringing from their education experience. And those could include, flexible spaces, maker spaces. They're very agile, flexible spaces that, again, require a lot of ability to move furniture around, plug in, considerations about the auditory environment, not bothering other adjacent ecosystems. The third one was kind of this shared collaborative space. That's for longer term pursuits, really more kind of the traditional, like maybe accounting personnel or people who aren't necessarily as highly collaborative as other types of workers. And then finally, kind of a space for information sharing. I guess you could think of it as conference room space, but spaces that are open to all, that support kind of your work from anywhere staff, so that your staff who's in office can, through technology, whatever that technology is today and in the future, kind of seamlessly meet as a group and feel a sense of connectedness. Again, with that kind of nomadic work from anywhere work modality.
Right.
And it's a place just for really training, sharing, presenting, spitballing ideas in a really, in a safe environment where you're not afraid to make a fool of yourself, make mistakes, that kind of thing.
Well, it sounds like the key, and it sort of goes back to Joel, when you were talking about how Gen Z, a lot of cases, are sort of independent contractor types, disruptor types. Kind of, they like choice, and this is something that's coming up a lot on the chat. The idea of choice, and so you have choice in the workplace, in the academic environment. You can do hybrid. You can work from home. You can work at work, and then when you're at work, you can work in all these different kinds of spaces. John, that you were talking about, you can work in the traditional hands down. You can work in the collaboration, but then there's like many different, and choice keeps coming up, and that obviously, you have a generation that's grown up with a lot of choices, and they're comfortable with that. They're not like older generations that were like, this is how it's done, and we're going to do, it's a much different mindset. And another huge part of the mindset of Gen Z that I've noticed, and this is something that's also coming up in the questions, is we touched on wellness, and they're in touch with that, but I think they're just in touch with social with just, I'm trying to sum it all up, but like wellness and social justice and sort of doing the right thing, for lack of a better word. And I think, and environmentally doing the right thing as well. There's definitely that sort of, there's a social intensity, which I think is a great aspect of this generation. I think my generation, we were sort of, oh, this is great, this green movement, whatever. Now it's like, no, you're going to do this. And I wonder, from all your perspectives, and Joel, maybe I'll start with you if you don't mind, are there demands for that now? Like, oh, you're going to build a building, huh? Like, is it going to be, is it going to be LEED Platinum? Because if not, we're going to be really upset. Or, are you thinking of everybody when you build this? Like, what is the pressure now to do things the right way?
Pressure is intense, and it comes from all stakeholders, particularly from the youngest generations, from Gen Z. They are very, very interested and wanting to know. So at a minimum, our board's policy is that a building must be minimally LEED Silver equivalent. Doesn't have to get the actual certification, because that sometimes costs you a couple $100,000 just to do the administrative work. Doesn't benefit the building that much more. But the students are really asking for, and asking in detail, like, why can't we have more solar in this, or what other alternatives? How many EV charging stations are you going to be having in this design? And then they want to talk about, the fit and finish and the materials. Do we really want to use wood on this? Because isn't that going to be driving XYZ? I've heard that concrete is horrendous for carbon emissions. Can we make it more, a different type of building that is not so concrete intensive? So they're very informed, very concerned, and very advocating. And it's something that, we do take very seriously and work hard to incorporate into the design and construction of our buildings.
It's really interesting. I'm sure, because it's that differentiator between, oh, that would be nice, and you're being held to task. That's what really changes things. And, I wonder, when you're designing an office, if that's ever, or I'm going to go to a different location where I have internet that's working. I apologize. This is all part of the plan, so we can show you how I'm not a Gen Zer. Just want to prove that to everybody.
You're being flexible. Come on.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, flexible
You're pivoting,
space.
You're pivoting quickly.
Yes, going into a space with my dog barking. This is great. Okay.
Your office dog.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my apologies about that. Let me just plug in and then I'll be good. Okay, sorry about that. When did I get cut off?
Basically, as soon as you started talking last.
Okay, so I was asking John and Samantha. I was asking you guys a little bit about this difference between, oh, this would be nice, and like Gen Z, and the sort of the kind of the society in general being much more demanding about doing right, either socially doing right or environmentally doing right to an extent that's not just sort of a little bit of green, but it's like fundamentally green. So that must be affecting everything you're doing. I'm curious, or a lot of it. Tell me.
I'm going to go. I'll go first. Okay, so I'll use our firm as an example. I think previously stated that lead in green strategies, or something that used to be perceived as an ad service in a sense, and now it's just the way we do business. We have a studio that keeps everybody not only informed but honest on green initiatives as they're incorporated into the buildings we design. As a firm ourselves, part of our mission statement is to kind of first look at serving the community, the greater good, and to that extent, that's not only a part of our design philosophy and mandate coming from the top, but kind of putting pedal to the metal. We've established actually a number of years ago a nonprofit organization called Designing Futures, and it was funded from HMC and is available to not only employees but outside nonprofits to apply for grants that again serve underserved communities, the greater good, and other kind of worthwhile initiatives, and that really does play hand in hand with, if it's to be believed, one of the characteristics attributed to Gen Z is that they are very not only digitally engaged to the world and their communities, but they're activists. They'll march and protest for causes they believe in. They're concerned with their community, and they have a very high rate of volunteerism. So I think as universities and private business, municipal entities move forward, that's going to be a question that as people interview for jobs, they're going to ask, what is your policy on your social engagement?
And I think too, if we know now that salary isn't the main driver to really, how this generation is making a choice on where they work, there has to be something greater behind the company than just paying well. There has to be some of these drivers. So I think it kind of forces our hand.
It was interesting. I just saw it was a Gallup poll on that very topic about, there is a point where an additional $5,000 in salary doesn't have the impact and contribute towards satisfaction, job satisfaction, and happiness. And that number is somewhere around $95,000 a year. So if you're making $35,000 a year and you get a $5,000 raise, that makes me pretty happy. 95 to 100, not as much. and that goes, what starts to then add to employee satisfaction are not only kind of these Instagrammable workplaces that are cool and comfortable, but the company's social engagement and feeling good about the kind of the bigger concerns that your organization is a part of. And it was kind of interesting in this article, they followed Glassdoor. There's a Glassdoor survey that measures kind of the best companies to work for, and the companies they tracked, I think, the companies that made this list, they tracked if they were publicly traded, they tracked their stock performance against their peers who weren't on the list, and over a 10-year period, those companies outperformed the Dow and the market by a fairly sizable number.
That's encouraging.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not only good community stewardship, but it's also good business.
Yeah, and it's as Bruce Poole said in the chat, it's I like this. You don't build culture by offering free snacks or open seating. You do so by talking to people and understanding what they care about. And it seems like something you're all very invested in, for sure. And I like what another participant, Lanya Julian, said. I think this goes well with what we're saying. Every generation ever says the young people are disruptors and causing change. And it's something we all need. And that's part of the circle of how things go. We need to be pushed. And the newer generations are really doing that. And I think what we've all been saying about the social demands is something that certainly dovetails with the way our society is wanting to go. But there's a difference between wanting to go and being pushed that way. But if this generation is pushing the way it looks like they are, I think I have a lot of hope for that. And I think I think that dovetails. I'm gonna end my questions, but I do want to mention that or reiterate what Tina was saying about our pledge, Metropolis's interior design pledge. The first comprehensive framework for sustainable interior design, and it was created by ASID, IIDA, IDC, and Metropolis. And we really encourage all interior designers to take that pledge and really put their money where their mouth is. And again, it seems like Gen Z is going to help us do that as well. So that's very encouraging. I like to let folks, if there's anything else that I didn't ask, or if there's anything else that you wanted to say, let me know. Is there anything else that you would like to add? All right. Sounds like you're good. Well, thank you to all of you. Thank you so much for bearing with me with my non-Gen Z technology issues, and for being very generous and I think thought-provoking in your answers. I really appreciate it. And I should also thank again our sponsors, Certainteed and Groa, who make this possible. And thanks to HMC for helping us put this together. I think it was really worthwhile, and I appreciate it.